Now notice the line going through their face. This is what they call restoration. See, it's not restoration, it's destruction. This is deliberate destruction. So this is what they've done. There's nothing.
Did you see that? Really? Nothing gets me more angry than the destruction of ancient artifacts. I don't know how low you have to sink in your morality to destroy 3,500-year-old relic just so that you can claim that they weren't black? Wow. Just wow. And that's not even the half of it. There are many extremely popular statues in Kemet, ancient Egypt, that have been branded as the face of Egypt. But it's all part of the same effort to deny the African of his history. And guess what those fake statues happen to look like? Yep, you guessed it. They all look Levantine or white. Almost never do they look black African. Those fake almost never look like the original Kemetu.
Discovery Channel, National Geographic Channel. You see this? This is why we need to come.
It's supposed to be the work of a master sculptor, but the technique says otherwise. That's the work of, if not an amateur, then a second or third rate sculptor. And none of those would look for the pharaoh. You'd only have the best. The damage is selective, and that's a dead ringer for a fake.
Now, imagine this. I show you a piece from this German site, Alter RD, peddling what they claim is an ancient Egyptian artifact. At first glance, you might think, this is the real deal, straight from the Nile. But lean in with me, because something's whispering off in your ear. First off, why on earth is the nose still perfect? Second, how did it hold on to every vibrant hue when every other genuine piece from that era looks like it's been through a sandstorm? And third, doesn't it just look a tad too modern, too polished? Well, scroll down just a smidge, check that date, and bam, the ruse reveals itself. This so-called ancient gem, it's from the 2nd century AD. That's a full 500 years after the Greeks crashed the party, followed by the Romans turning the whole place into their playground. Calling this an ancient Egyptian artifact is like spotting a Victorian hat in 1920s Louisiana and declaring it Native American couture. Ridiculous, right? But oh, how they try. Hannibal Barker once said, "We will find a way, or we shall make one." This is the Without History channel. Every episode, we bring salient facts about ancient African civilizations in history and detail how these civilizations contributed to our modern world. We dive deep into what research has to say about the often overlooked or misattributed contributions of these key eras in our collective history. This channel would not exist without the invaluable support of our benefactors. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps us eradicate ignorance of our history. You see, almost every forgery in ancient Egyptian art shares this sneaky little thread. They're all desperate to shoehorn in European or Semitic features into the glorious Nubio-Kemetic legacy. If it were just about scamming rich collectors out of their cash, I'd almost chuckle and move on. But no, these fakes slither their way into the world's top museums, becoming the poster children for what ancient Egypt looked like. And why? Because they peddle this fantasy version of Kemet that's divorced from its black African roots, spinning tales of some Levantine or European Egypt, or worse, this mythical multicultural melting pot where black Africans were somehow at the bottom of the heap. Please. Ancient Egypt was the opposite of multicultural. It was a proud, unapologetic celebration of blackness, of Africanness, a blackness that's being whitewashed, one clever fake at a time. Whether it's forgeries for profit or straight-up ideological sabotage, the endgame's the same: erasure. Huge shout-out to Cam J-Verse and Mr. Theory on X for their contribution to this episode. I cannot recommend their content enough. Also, make sure you follow us on Twitter for content that we cannot post on YouTube. All the links are in the video description. Without question, ancient Egyptian artifacts top the charts for most faked in history. That 19th century gold rush for Kemetic treasures? It poured gasoline on a fire that's still raging. As the brilliant Egyptologist Manu Ampim put it, after scrutinizing thousands of ancient African artifacts. When the artifacts in question were examined meticulously, I found that the methods used to change or damage the images are varied, and they include subtly altering the shape of the nose on statues by using some type of sanding device, adding false noses, reshaping or completely destroying the face on temple and tomb walls, lightening the color of the face in body paint on statues and paintings, completely eliminating the paint on statues and paintings and thus making the images appear white, destroying the lower facial structure, particularly the chin and jaw area, putting in false bluish-gray inlaid eyes, plastering over temple images with white Portland cement during ongoing conservation work, and creating outright forgeries. These fraudulent feats, I call them the fingerprints of modern-day schemers. It hit me like a ton of bricks, such raw, seething aggression against Black imagery from the foes of classical African brilliance. Shocking, yet so telling. Back at the dawn of the 19th century, when the mania for Kemetic relics was peaking, fakes were laughably clumsy. But by mid-century, oh, they leveled up. Fortunes were flowing for anything Nubian or Kemetic, drawing in slick craftsmen teaming up with shady historians to crank out counterfeits. Egyptology insiders know many of these phonies inside out, but do they shout it from the rooftops? Hardly. They're happy milking the profits, financial and cultural, from these deceptions, targeting everyone from peasants to royalty. This one piece wielded such sway in Egyptology circles that it became the blueprint for Egyptian culture. Just glance at those oh-so-Caucasian traits. Zero subnasal prognathism, no broad African nose, no prominent cheekbones. It's like they custom-ordered it from a European catalog. Before her queenship, Tedasheri wasn't nobility. Perfect fodder for forgers, since tracing her lineage and her looks would be a nightmare. They got creative liberty to sculpt her as they pleased. But time is a ruthless truth-teller. Discoveries piled up, exposing the sham. And when I lay out this mountain of proof, you'll be steaming. Egyptologists noted the body proportions and style screamed mismatch for the late Second Intermediate Period or early New Kingdom. Proportions in Kemetic art? They're sacred, often dismissed but crucial. Ancient Egyptians adhered to strict rules in depicting bodies on walls and statues, rules mirroring African physiques, like wingspans exceeding height, a rarity outside African groups. Plus, carving techniques, tool marks, all modern vibes, not ancient craft. Hieroglyphs and titles, riddled with errors, anachronisms. Tedasheri's name and honors, off-kilter from real contemporaries. Provenance, sketchy. Popped up on the market sans solid dig site, classic forgery flag. Lab tests on stone and patina, artificial aging, chemicals screaming fake. Wear patterns, phony as a $3 bill for something 3,500 years old. You'd think they junk it, but no. It's strutting in the Berlin Museum like it owns the place. So here we have a statue debunked across disciplines, looking nothing like the pure Black Africans we know built Egypt, yet it's still spotlighted. Every tourist, kid, journalist walks out thinking this intact-faced lady reps ancient Egypt. That's more insidious than the forger's wildest dreams. Queen Tedasheri wed Pharaoh Senaktenre Ahmose, ascending to royalty. Her grandson Ahmose honored her with a pyramid, the last for a Kemetic queen. And here's his vibe. Even post-vandalism, those African features shine through. How long did Tedasheri's fake grace displays? A century. 100 years of books, articles warping global perceptions. Not until the 90s did they confess, yet it lingers. Let me be crystal. I'm fine with display, if it's in a fakes and frauds wing or modern art hall, not ancient Egypt. If museums poured fortunes promoting it, they owe equal effort correcting the record, funding re-education. If education's the goal, errors demand public fixes, or removal. But Tedasheri's not solo. There's a breed of fakes crafted not for cash, but to arm certain groups with, see, told ya, ammo. They're so absurd, you question the creator's IQ and defender's agendas. You've seen them. Prince Rahotep and wife Nofret. These vivid, painted limestone wonders rank as top private statues from ancient Egypt. Unearthed in Rahotep's mastaba near Sneferu's pyramid in Meidum, 4th Dynasty era. Colors pristine, expressions lifelike. Chat with any die-hard Arab Egypt fan, and boom, they flash this. But scrutinize with me. It bucks ancient African conventions. Intact faces? Odd, when most Kemetic statues are battered. Paint survived millennia? Even on hieroglyphs? And those glyphs painted, not carved. Against the grain. Rahotep's piece breaks rules galore. Royal son, high official, yet wigless? Gray mustache? No emblem in right hand across chest? Kilt belt fully on lap, not one end jutting as per norm? Left hand emblem free? Museums worldwide brim with de-Africanized artifacts, courtesy of these plotters. Quick tour. The Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum in San Jose, California, boasts the West's biggest Egyptian collection, but it's stuffed with replicas sporting predictably European looks. New York's Metropolitan? A Hatshepsut room, where every image sports obvious nose jobs. Holland's National Museum of Antiquities? Statues with meticulous facial makeovers. Cairo Museum? Fakes, nose tweaks, lightened hues mimicking European pallor. Boston's Museum of Fine Arts? Replacement heads center stage, while black ruler statues hide in corners or basements. France's Louvre? Stunning African icons, yet signs herd tourists to the seated scribe, a racial redo looking European. England's British Museum? Faces reworked so slickly, detection's tough. Austria's Art History Museum? Backward layout. Invaders' era's front and center, true Kemetic builders shoved back. Britain's Manchester Museum? Skull-based reconstructions yielding Europeans or ethnics neutrals. Rahotep and Nofret? No outlier. Another Face of Egypt nobles artifact is equally laughable. We'll circle back. Plus, forger testimonies on spotting fakes. Oh, pause. Eye this statue. Notice? Nose job by Italian museum folks, crudely reshaping Thutmose III's race. Common ploy. Noses define black African traits. Royals' mummies, often busted or tweaked noses. But Nefertiti's bust? Not just altered, full-on fabricated. I'm no conspiracy nut, so judge yourselves why Nefertiti's bust still queens it in Berlin after Kate Connolly's 2022 bombshell. According to a Swiss art historian, the bust is less than 100 years old. Henri Sterlin has said the stunning work that will later this year be the showpiece of the city's reborn Neues Museum was created by an artist commissioned by Ludwig Borchardt, the German archaeologist credited with digging Nefertiti out of the sands. Sterlin has claimed that the bust was created to test ancient Nefertiti, to serve as a fake, and pretended it was genuine. Berlin author and historian Erhard Drogen-Erevan has added his weight to the row with his book, Missing Link in Archaeology, published in 2009, in which he has also called Nefertiti a fake, modeled by an artist on Borchardt's statuesque wife. This tea's been brewing decades pre-Kate. Harm done? Endless online posts. Quote this Twitter post. I think most people know Queen Nefertiti. There's a famous statue for her in Berlin, Germany. Just have a look at her features to figure out that ancient Egyptians weren't black. Nothing against being black, but they weren't black nor white. I don't blame the poster. Authority figures fed them fakes. Why rebel? Easier to tag blacks as culture vultures than research Nefertiti's shady origins. Per mainstream archaeologists, Thutmose's master artist ditched prior Nefertiti styles for this one Nordic Caucasian outlier? The most famous intact piece from Amarna? Nonsense. Especially under Akhenaten and Nefertiti's watchful eyes. Enter Sean Greenhalgh, pro forger.
It's supposed to be the work of a master sculptor, but the technique says otherwise. That's the work of, if not an amateur, then a second or third rate sculptor. And none of those would look for the pharaoh. You'd only have the best. That'd be like finding a Michelangelo sculpture in marble, and then you'd find out that the ears, the eyes, all the hands, the difficult parts are all made in stucco and added on. It just wouldn't be done. It's a major point to its fakery because it's the kind of thing I've done myself, sourcing beads or pearls or whatever for in a piece. The damage on it is the major point of it being a later copy. It's something I've done myself, it's something I've seen on other fakes.
This is well known in Egyptology circles. However, if you do a Google search for Nefertiti, this is what you get. Professional ethics require academics to speak more openly about this. Alas, if anything, she would have looked like this. But who is behind all of these alterations and, beyond money, what are their motives? In his work, Manu Mpim also stated, "Who are the conspirators responsible for these acts of destruction, alteration, and invention?" is a basic question that must be answered. Brian Fagan, in his book, The Rape of the Nile, 1975, documents a list of culprits: the Christian Copts who destroyed statues and monuments, the conquering Arabs who dismantled ancient buildings, and the 18th and 19th century European travelers, adventurers, and archaeologists who were treasure hunters, plunderers, and looters. It was during the 19th century that a vast number of ancient Egyptian artifacts were excavated, but most of these discoveries were not adequately documented with original on-site photographs and detailed field reports, which are now standard procedures within the archaeological field. The systematic documentation of archaeological excavations did not develop until many years after volumes of artifacts were already taken from their original African sites and eventually placed in museums. Indeed, it is a sketchy record of how most of these artifacts were discovered and eventually made it onto museum floors. It is, in fact, a miracle that any African-looking artifact survived all these waves of purging. And these artifacts with obvious African features would not have survived if they were the exception. The only way for them to have lasted this long is because they were so numerous in so many places, including in places of kingship. They were present in such numbers, so prominently, that they had to undertake defacing pharaoh after pharaoh, mural after mural, to try and give the lie a chance. This brings us to the identification of a large group of conspirators who are the handlers of the excavated artifacts. This group includes excavators, antiquities dealers, museum curators and directors, and restorers and conservationists. Somewhere between the original excavation of the artifacts to their transport, sale and acquisition, storage, cleaning, conservation, and finally their display on the museum floor, there has been a diligent effort at altering, reworking, and touching up the facial features of countless statues. The conspirators who perpetrate these acts are behind-the-scenes actors who use a hit-and-run strategy of defacement and alteration of the art. They hide their hands from public view, but the results of their fraudulent and destructive activity is plain to see by anyone who carefully examines the evidence, as their pattern of fraud is highly distinctive. The lack of original documentation of many excavated artifacts has made it easy for these conspirators to commit their fraud. It is well known that many great artifacts of ancient Egypt were destroyed by the hands of plunderers during the widespread looting and trading in antiquities that went on for centuries. But what is not well known is the full story of the artifacts that did survive the wave of plunderers and make it into modern museum collections. The results of their fraudulent work are the countless altered artifacts, reworked pieces, fake genealogies, and a host of forged statues. The most recent revelation of the shocking fabrications by this group of handlers, or more specifically, Western museum directors, is reported in a 2001 issue of Archaeology magazine. This report is associated with an article by Peter Lacovara. Archaeology reported that in the absence of scholarship, the directors of the Niagara Falls Museum in Ontario, Canada, fabricated pedigrees for many of their Egyptian mummies in the mid-19th century. The most imaginative of these fake pedigrees, or false identities, was created for a bearded male mummy of the Roman period. The museum officials invented the following elaborate story for him, which is a complete myth. General Oyem Noeru, the general-in-chief of Thutmose III. He was a man of military skill, also a famous magician. He was 60 years old when he died. The scar on his forehead was caused by an enraged elephant while defending the king from his onslaughts. A palace was erected for the general near that of the king. The museum officials took their scandalous activity even further, as for many years the general was displayed in the coffin of Iat Shiret, a high-ranking woman from the 25th dynasty, which was 700 years before his time. It is incredible that the directors of a public museum would take an unidentified Roman period mummy with a European facial appearance, put him in a woman's coffin from 700 years earlier, and then create a bogus identity for him as a famous general during a period which was another 700 years earlier than the coffin he was buried in. Even though this mummy and other artifacts at the museum were not studied comprehensively by an Egyptologist, this is yet another case which documents that Western museum directors would go to any lengths in the 19th and early 20th century to falsify evidence. Currently, there is no doubt that this list of conspirators includes local Egyptian government workers who are carrying out many acts of destruction on a regular basis. These men either work for the Egyptian government on conservation projects or for various European or North American archaeological teams. On several occasions in the 1980s and 1990s, these unsupervised, minimally skilled government workers have been caught on videotape, plastering over temple images and inscriptions. In fact, it is impossible to visit the Karnak Temple in Luxor and not see the recent defacement. And it is suspicious that, with rare exception, Egyptologists are silent about this matter. And if you have any doubt, here is Zahi Hawass, the previous Minister of Tourism and Antiquities, a position he held twice. So you would expect someone of his position and influence to hold a scientifically sound position on the matter. But I will let you listen to his now famous statement.
No, they were dark skinned,
But they were not black.
But they are not Negro. Because look at the lips of the Negroes like that and the nose like this. It's not really the Egyptian origin at all. It's different, completely different. And this is why you cannot connect the Egyptian civilization with the African at all. It's different. Or from Syria, Palestine, Mesopotamia.
So now, how do you think Zahi Hawass would act if he found artifacts in opposition to his publicly stated opinion? If the person in the top leadership position when it comes to ancient Egypt thinks this way, after having seen all of the artifacts that I have shown, after having read all these studies that clearly demonstrate that the Kemites were genetically and phenotypically black, if the leader acts this way, how then do the army of managers and the government employees act when they face yet another artifact that is clearly black? And for those who further doubt that many Egyptians would desecrate the dead of ancient Egypt in order to claim that civilization for themselves, then they should watch what a lot of Egyptians do to these kids who are very much so alive. Here, the kids describe that they are all from various parts of Sudan. They then go on to explain that they are beaten in the streets of Egypt just for the color of their skin, and that they are often chased and abused by the Arab population.
مصر مش حلوة. مصريين بيضربونا.
هنا الناس المصريين في الشارع بيبقوا كويسين معاكي ولا لأ؟
لا.
بيعملوا ايه؟
العيال بتجري ورانا. بيضربونا.
As always, I don't believe that all or the majority of non-black Africans engage in these acts. But beyond a certain threshold, there is enough hatred for it to become systemic and for it to taint a whole population. You have to reprogram your mind so that you can now see that many of the artifacts you have been shown and publicized about ancient Egypt are, in fact, fake or heavily transformed to look different from the original African. The fake bust of Nefertiti is not the icon of ancient Egypt. Here is the true icon of ancient Egypt, the statue of the god Osiris, carved during the time of the pyramids. These are the features they don't show you. These are the faces of the gods they don't display. If ancient Egypt was multicultural, then there would be at least one soldier that looks Levantine or white. And if you say they were Nubian archers, then please point me to the white-skinned captain or general. I haven't seen any. Monuments are being defaced at an alarming rate too. Manu Ampine, during a visit to Kemet in Nubia, mentioned the following. Widespread damage and deliberate recarving of temple images have allowed some Egyptologists to falsely portray ancient Egypt as a multiracial society, suggesting it belongs to world heritage rather than African history. As a result, many tourists receive a distorted view of the builders' true black origins. European and Arab actors have selectively altered non-African images, erasing evidence of African features. Only thorough first-hand research of surviving temple evidence reveals that ancient Egypt was a black civilization. And again, I am not suggesting that all Arabs or all Euro descendants participated in or hold this position. Modern conspirators have deliberately cut a line through the face of Ramses II on the left in order to change the shape of his nose, but you can still clearly make out that he is a black man. The face of Ramses IV has also been completely obliterated. In this picture, you can see an Egyptian government worker stand in front of the massive wall damage that he has just created. The evidence of his destructive activity is on the ground around him. Scaffolding, piles of dismantled wall material, tools, mixing water, and a bag of white Portland cement to smooth over the wall surface after the images and inscriptions are broken away. In the tombs, not only have the faces of many wall images been altered or destroyed, but the crimes against African mummies are almost beyond description. There is a tradition dating back to at least 1000 AD in which Arabs, and later Europeans, engaged in the practice of eating mummy. This practice has been written about by a number of authors, and it was widespread in modern Egypt and Western Europe. It consisted of countless ancient African mummies being burned, ground up, and made into a kind of powder in order to be eaten. This incredible act of cannibalism was considered an effective medical practice and folk remedy. The belief became widely prevalent that cures could be obtained by eating ground-up, preserved bodies. Eating mummy was considered effective in treating contusions, coughs, epilepsy, migraines, ulcers, cases of poison, and as a general panacea. Mummies or fragments of mummies were taken from their tombs and sent to Cairo and Alexandria, where merchants sent the ground-up parts all over Western Europe. In the European Middle Ages and Renaissance, mummy trafficking was widespread. Egyptian mummies were so sought after that the chaplain to Queen Catherine de' Medici of France made a special trip to Egypt in 1549 and, together with some physicians from Italy, broke into a number of tombs around Saqqara in a quest for mummies to use in various medicines. Catherine's father-in-law, King Francis I of France, also carried ground-up mummy in a pouch around his waist at all times in case of an emergency. So next time you are confronted with an image of ancient Egypt, Kemet, that doesn't look African, know that there is a whole industry built to make sure that the artifacts do not reflect the ethnicity of those who built and lived in that civilization. An industry that is an extension of the philosophy that tries to deny any achievement of the black man and the black woman, no matter how much evidence is presented.
Don't forget to add this video to your favorites so you can reference it later in discussions with Kemet deniers. Have you clicked the like button yet? Don't miss our previous episode on the black origin of the Phoenician civilization. Link in the description.
Join us and see how those who are said to be without history birth civilization itself.